Hello, and welcome to our latest fireside chat. Today, we're going to be looking at our June benchmark report, where we look at the leads, rentals, and payments for June 1st through 5th. Today, I have with me Phil Murphy, the founder and president of Call Potential. Thank you for joining us, Phil.
Thanks, Holly.
I'm the director of marketing, Holly Fiorello. Phil, why don't we take a look at what you have for us today? Could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the data and how you pull these numbers?
Sure, yeah. Thanks again, Holly, for doing this. But really what we do is we took a look at our Call Potential customer base, and we went out and tried to make sure we had a representative sample that we could show not only month-to-month gain, but also year-over-year gain. And these are customers that have been using us for their communications, their lead tracking, their collections, their call centers. It's also meant to be representative. You've got large operators with large portfolios. You've got small operators with 1 or 2 stores, ranging from a small store that might be a satellite all the way up to very large stores with 2,000-3,000 units within them and across the entire country. So we took all of that data and tried to aggregate it and look at it and go to decide, see what happened in March, April, May, June, and then kind of how are we progressing through this on a call basis, a call center basis, a lead basis, and then also a collections and payments basis for many of our stores. And so really kind of put all that together and then hopefully be able to walk you through everything today.
Sounds exciting.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually share my screen here and then we'll hop right into it.
Right.
All right, so really the first thing we did is, we always kind of look at that first touch point and looking at the call volume coming in. And in our past reports, we've talked about some of the impact of COVID, and then really kind of now as we're starting to open up and we're seeing more things coming about. In March, obviously we had quite a bit of higher call volume in 2020 with a lot of the college students coming in to store. April, there was really an adjustment in that first week. We saw a lower call volume as people were trying to figure out how to interact. But we're seeing May and June, and especially now in June, that trend continuing on. Customers, they can't necessarily come into the store. They don't have that in-person interaction, or whether they can or can't, may not be comfortable doing it, and they're choosing to go on the phone. There's that increase in web and online aspects as well. But for those that may not be technically inclined, or those who may just prefer to hear a voice on the other end of the phone, they're choosing to call in, talk to that manager, talk to that call center agent to get a more specialized help. This month for June, we actually saw about a 21% increase year over year over what we saw in 2019. And at the same time, that was about 11% increase in month over month from May. And so that trend we're assuming is going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to maintain that kind of preferred communication channel for a lot of our customers.
So in your opinion, this isn't only, would you say this isn't only just people calling to see if the facilities are open and because they're not, as willing to come stop by in person, but do you think it's also a rebound effect?
Yeah, this is really just a change in how people do business. We do track that as well. What are they calling for? Are they calling for customer payments? Are they calling for leads, inquiries? Is it robodials? Whatever it is, we try and take all those calls and differentiate them and put them into pools. And what we found is it's an across the board increase. So it's not just lead calls that are coming in or just customer payments that are coming in. We're seeing an increase throughout all the different groups that are taking place.
Oh, okay, great.
Right. So yeah, and really kind of continuing on from there, looking at the call volume that's coming in and how does that impact who's answering it. What we've seen in those first weeks of the month is when COVID really started hitting, we saw a big jump in our call center volume, and we continue to see that from May to June. You'll see here in 2019, we saw a relatively moderate jump, a normal seasonality jump. But you can see when you look at that 2019 year over year growth to 2020, there's been a big jump in everything that's gone on. We've seen about a 28% increase year over year. Month over month, we've seen a 5% increase in terms of what's coming across there too.
So you have call centers up there. Can you explain what call centers you're tracking?
Yeah, so the call centers we track we operate a large number of our platform operates a large number of internal call centers. So a lot of small to medium to large operators that decide they want to control that phone aspect of their business. They use our software to have their own internal call center. And so this is really tracking that, looking at what's the result of that, what's the call volume of that, and how does that work.
Okay, great. And are these, so the call centers, are they distributed? Are they internal?
Yeah, you normally got a variety that's out there. So we'll have our large operators that will sit there with that traditional cubicle call center you kind of think of in the back of your head. But then we've got some of our smaller operators that may use their own stores. So, for instance, in my own operations, I own and operate 17 stores, and we use 2 of the stores in order to handle those. They act as call center agents to handle those calls for me, helped me save quite a bit of money on my external call center costs. But at the same time, the big benefit for me operationally was I could control my sales pipeline. I could control, what it is that's being said, how it's being sold, because at least in my belief, no one can sell my product as well as my own managers. And so that helps along with that.
So you're saying call centers are receiving more calls, and obviously that's by design. You're choosing where that call is funneling to, correct?
Yes, yeah. So within the call potential system, we can choose how it routes. Does it go to a pay by phone? Does it go to a location? Does it go to a call center agent? And this metric we're looking at here is purely tracking that volume that's making it to the call center. That might be a
Okay.
ring first to call center. It might be a location first aspect. There may be using our smart route system, which is automatically rerouting delinquent customers to pay by phone, or it might be rerouting them to a
Mhm.
location if they're an existing current customer, or different things like that.
And I know we've talked about this in previous fireside chats, but in case this is your first time joining us, Phil has 17 locations in Illinois, self-storage facilities that he uses the software. And so some of the questions that I'm going to ask him are going to be both how he's implementing, some of this data and changes that he's seeing, and how he's using them in his locations. So Phil, what I was just about to ask you is, are you prioritizing how some of your calls go to the call center? Like, what kind of calls would you prioritize
Yeah.
hit the
So
call center versus hitting a location?
yeah. So within it, our smart route automatically detects who it is that's calling and what they're likely calling about. But then even within that, we're able to set a priority so that our sales calls get answered before our customer service calls. So if we have 2 calls that come in and one is somebody we've deemed to be a sales call or an unknown caller, that's going to route to my call center agent to be answered first before the customer service call. The way I look at it
Okay.
now, we can decide if you wanted to have a heavier customer service oriented one versus sales oriented one. You certainly can, but you're able to decide what queue, what's the priority, what's the type of type of agent skill set that should be answering that call, and route them accordingly.
Based on these numbers and seeing stronger inbound calls coming in and seeing kind of like a rebound effect, are you making any changes to that prioritization or call routing?
We made a lot of our changes early on. We've had to sit there and make sure we're properly staffed. Is really it. Just making sure that our 2 locations enough. And so what we've done is we've trained a 3rd location so they can fill in, especially around that first of the month time frame, because of that significant increase in call volume, not only naturally but also due to the impacts of kind of how we communicate with our customers. We we'll bring that 3rd location on as an agent during those high times. During the rest of the month, we roll them back off. They're back to normal store operations and continue on that way.
So you're using your call center at your locations to answer higher volume calls if they have, from other locations that may not be open, or maybe, they're at capacity. So you're just kind of rolling them over.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. So, and then really kind of the next thing that, I think a lot of us experienced was looking at that and going, okay, all these calls are coming in. What's the impact been on leads? And, one of the things I think a lot of us saw was this almost cutting in half the lead volume that we were seeing coming into stores. And March was great. We see here is above 2019. A lot of us experienced that because of the college campus influx. But then all of a sudden April just dropped off the map. Now, luckily for my own operations and for many of the operators I've spoken to, the move outs were cut even more. So we didn't see a net loss, but it was figuring out, okay, when are my move-ins going to come back? And in May, we saw quite a bit of gain. In June, we've actually been pretty glad to see that year over year, we're only 2% off of where we were in 2019. And so what that's telling us is we're seeing a lot of that return volume. We're seeing a lot of that kind of continued growth. People are getting back to normal. And it's not just within states that have opened back up, where we're seeing it across the board. Now, there are always pockets where you may not be experiencing it quite as much, but you're hopefully seeing a lot of that continued gain. Now, month over month, that showed about a 20% increase. But we're expecting really kind of the remainder of June to really continue to ramp up. And hopefully July, we're back ahead of where we were in 2019. And this turns out to be just a delayed rental season versus a kind of skipped rental season for many of our customers.
It's very encouraging.
Yeah, no, this is something where I was really glad to be able to share this data, because a lot of people are asking questions. Is it normal? Am I slow? Am I ahead? And, where is it at? And, obviously at the end of the day, leads are our lifeblood, and then turning those into rentals. And what are we doing to do that? And really in the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're seeing that in rentals.
Operationally, are you making any changes?
Operationally, we're continuing to follow up. Follow-ups are becoming more and more critical. It's how do I follow up? Am I calling, texting, emailing? We're continuing to stay in contact with people, because what we're going to see in some of the later data is the impacts not only on the lead volume, but also on rentals and also on lead conversion, which we're going to dive into. How do we go out and affect that?
Have you made any? Go ahead.
Some of the things that our customers have been doing is making sure they're following up. Having those controls in place, whether it's phone calls, live calls, conversations, whether it's text, whether it's emails, and then also that move to that contactless, that self-serve rental aspect and approach that we're seeing.
That's what I was just going to ask, if you're doing contactless rentals, but that'll probably be later on in the presentation.
Yeah, well, and really heading into the next thing, this is really where we're seeing this is rentals were basically spot on in March with 2019. They dropped like a rock in April. We already talked about that in terms of volume that's coming in, but then in May, it really started coming back. In June, we're about 12% off of year over year. However, a lot of that is because a lot of those leads that came in the beginning of the month, they're still waiting to be closed, and we're still continuing to see them turn into rentals. And so I expect that number 12% to probably be cut in half. So we're within about, I'm assuming we'll be within about 5 or 6% when we're backward looking from the end of the month. So we're seeing people going out, we're seeing calls coming in, we're seeing inquiries coming in, whether it's website, whether it's phone. But the great part is they're actually turning into rentals. Now, a lot of industries, a lot of markets have seen, especially within the REITs, taking a much more aggressive pricing approach. But we're seeing the data showing us that's really becoming less and less necessary. Hopefully we're going to see people coming out there that would used to cut prices, that used to sit there and try and figure out, how do I get that one rental that's out there? As the rental volume's returning, as people are returning back to normalcy, we're going to be able to start to return back to our normal pricing, our normal revenue management, our normal approach to business within here. And that's going to really end up being something we're going to have to recover over the next few months. But the first leg of that is leads. The next leg is rentals. And then from there, it's going to be revenue management that we're going to really drive home from there.
Are you seeing in the industry, or maybe in your own operations, are you seeing any kind of different, other pivots rather than, texting the lease, or trying to, promote online move-ins? Like, when you look at these rentals, like, are you seeing people do changes that are maybe supporting the ability for the rentals to go up quicker?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of different things in terms of, how do we get that rental to continue? The over the phone move-ins for many of our operators, whether it's call center or store based, has jumped significantly. We've got a lot of people who are using our platform to take the call, to do the move-in, text out the e-sign, get it signed, and get it back. So that entire process is taking place over the phone without them having to come in contact with anyone. The other side of it, obviously, you've got a lot of online. There's been a lot of conversation of online move-in, and that is a very powerful tool, and it's one everyone really should be doing. But at the same time, you've got to figure out, how am I going to handle that person who's not able to do online, or they're not comfortable or not willing to rent online. And phone has become a very powerful tool for that, especially cutting short that lead process. How do I go out there and get somebody to stop shopping? And that's become a very important part of that.
And I'm going to put you on the spot right now, because I know you've been doing online move-ins for the last 4 years or maybe longer. Do you know if your breakdown has changed a lot? Like, if your online move-ins are on par with your over the phone, or if you've seen
our online move-ins are up considerably. Our over the phone move-ins are up considerably. It's something where we've basically taken our total move-in number has really returned to where it was. However, none of it's, very little of it is in store. We do have some people that come in and we'll talk to them through the door and handle it that way. But really, everything's being done virtually. Everything's being done in that contactless manner across my stores.
That's what I've heard before. I was wondering if it was the same for you too. Great.
And really kind of taking leads, rentals, the biggest thing that everybody looks at is lead conversion. How are those leads turning into rentals? And while what we've seen a drop from 2020. A lot of that, you can see, it was already taking place in March. A lot of that was because of the competitive nature of new buildings, new construction, new competition. But we saw a big drop in April. There were a lot of leads that came in, but they just decided it really wasn't worth the risk of going in and renting. But now we're starting to see a return of that May, June, where now we're only seeing about a 5% off. But we're expecting that to continue to grow. That June number, as those leads start to convert more and more, we're going to probably see that come pretty close, if not to this 2019 number, and then hopefully getting back up closer to that 60% mark. Now, this is all leads. This is web and call center and website and really all of those coming in, converting. Now, the way we look at this is total leads that are coming in. This isn't just those we considered qualified or those that were worth putting down. A lot of operators will go out there, and a lead's only a lead if they gave me their email or gave me their phone number or gave me their name. Within our system, every point of contact, every conversation we have about a unit goes towards this. And so it comes with a true conversion rate versus looking at, how many website forms did I fill out and forgetting the people that called, or did my manager happen to put them all in? It's a much clearer, much more specific lead conversion rate versus, I've talked to many operators and they measure them in so many different ways. It becomes very difficult to kind of compare apples to apples.
So it seems like there were still leads, but maybe like you were saying, the follow-up might not have been as many messages, were there less follow-ups? What do you think
everybody was following up, everybody was working those leads. It was just really a comfort level with a lot of customers. Okay. So when I say customers, the renters, they were going out there in April. It was very much that stay-at-home mentality, that order that was new to everyone's mind. They weren't really sure how to respond, and storage was kind of on the least of their mind. That's why we saw such a drop in move-outs. They weren't moving in, they weren't moving out, they weren't calling, they weren't doing really anything other than trying to figure out, how do I make it through this? We're seeing now that people are becoming more comfortable, now that things are opening up. They're figuring out how to operate in kind of the new normal. And that's why we're seeing a return in calls and leads and rentals. Everything's really starting to trend up to more normalcy.
I hope next month it's right there.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have all this behind us, soon. But kind of moving on from leads, really the next thing that we looked at is contact free, payments, things like that, text, email, pay by phone. Really looking at how were people paying, and you can see in here, we're already seeing trending up. There was already a gap in March between 2019 and 2020. But you can see 2019 was a pretty flat. It had its ups and downs, but it was always kind of around that similar growth pattern. 2020 has been a completely different world. People are trying to figure out how to pay. They're going in and now they're paying via text. They're paying via email. They're paying in that pay by phone IVR system. Year over year, that's 45% increase that we've seen in contact-free payments. It's a 2% increase month over month. So we're starting to see some stabilization in there, but it's going to maintain, we believe it's going to maintain and stay a preferred mechanism for customers interacting with us. They may, and once things are fully opened up and once things return to normal, there will be those people that want to return back in and have that face-to-face interaction to do business. But there's going to be many people that go, there's no need. I'm comfortable with what I've been doing. Why go back to what I was? It saves me the time of having to drive into the store. It saves me the time of having to write a check. It's just done. And really one of the biggest surprises.
It's interesting that month over month it's still growing.
Yeah, it's still growing month over month. And really the big thing we saw was really, this is kind of the telltale sign to us. A lot of people were surprised. There was a lot of insecurity in terms of, is my job still going to be there? Am I going to be laid off? And it was kind of a surprise to see the growth in autopay. The unemployment has grown significantly. Now, recently it's dropped back down. We don't know where that's going to go from here, but even in the times when we had reached, I think 18% was one of our peaks of unemployment, we continue to see autopay enrollment. We continue to see people decide, you know what, I'd rather sign up for autopay, credit card, debit card, whatever it is, so that I don't have to remember to come in. I don't want to come into the store. And so year over year, that was a 46% increase. We saw people already doing it. I mean, you can see March was already a growth as it was, but was a steady trend throughout 2019. There was a big spike in 2020 that's continued to maintain. And these are, to put perspective to this, these are new autopay enrollments. These are new customers deciding to enroll. So this isn't, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 people that maintained an autopay. This is 2,200 people that were not enrolled in autopay last month that decided to auto-enroll this month. So
how are they enrolling themselves in autopay?
So they're enrolling through the Call Potential's self-serve, contactless payment method. So when they're going through that payment, text, email, pay by phone, they're able to opt into autopay. And so they can enroll in that portion of it, so they don't have to worry about kind of those ongoing fees. They don't have to worry about paying their rent. And we're finding it's easy, check a box, and they're moving on and getting to forget about it. And for an operator, that's immensely valuable to me as an operator, because an autopay customer generally stays significantly longer than a non-autopay customer. I was talking to one of our customers, and they're seeing 3 to 6 months, depending on the property and region, of extended stay for an autopay customer versus a non-autopay customer. So these are immensely valuable to what they're doing.
I want to go back just a step and talk about the numbers of the payments that were made, because I know I don't want to gloss over it. I know we talked about it last time, but again, I think it's important that we've seen the amount of messages that go out be reduced, and the messaging had been softened by a lot of operators because they're trying to be empathetic, and the different lien laws and everything that's going on. They change their messaging for the reminders that are going out. So have you seen a return to the amount of messages that are going out?
Yeah,
is that what the big jump is?
The next slide here is going to hop into that. Really talking about the events that are going out and how that results. What we've seen is in April we had a lot of customers pull back. A lot of our users pull back and go, you know what? I'm not going to send messages in this time. I don't want to disrupt people. What we did is we really actually made a kind of a COVID recommended collection flow and said, hey, here's how we feel it would be best to contact the customer, softening the message, dropping off a lot of the auction messaging. Here's a frequency we think will work. and we pushed it out there. That dropped a lot of that messaging. But what it did is, you'll notice on the other slide, it didn't really impact the number of payments. It didn't really impact the number of auto pays. What it did is it allowed us to take a softer tone without being that big bad guy trying to take our money in the midst of this crisis, but it let them stay in touch with them. One of the things that a lot of our storage renters use those messages for is reminders. They'll get a text message on that 5th, 6th, whatever of the month, say, "Oh yeah, that's right, I forgot to pay my storage rent." Now it's up to us, up to our operators, whether they send that message before or after that first late fee. Some people decide to do it before so they can get that money in before the fee. Some people do it the day after so that they, because that late fee revenue might be important to them. But a lot of people adjusted it so it started showing up before. I started reminding them in the midst of all this, like, hey, remember, you've got your storage rent here. I understand if it's a problem, but communicate with us. And so we saw that big drop in April. We saw May it really start to return to normal. And in June, we've seen kind of a return to business, return to normalcy, and how we're reaching out, how we're contacting, a lot of those customers. Year over year, that's about a 7% growth. Month to month, about a 10% growth in what we see people executing on their collections.
Can you define what a collection event is?
Yeah, a collection event is a text message, an email, an auto-dialed phone call, and also even live calls where it tells your manager, hey, pick up the phone, call this person, let's have a conversation about what it is. Automation should not replace what your manager, nothing replaces your manager and the conversation, the connection they're going to have with that customer. Text messages are great. They remind people, but at the end of the day, at least in my own operations, I always make sure I've got that manager interaction so they can have that conversation. They can say, hey, what's going on? Oh, you got an issue. For my own operations, we looked at it and said, any customer that comes to us with a problem, we're going to keep notes of it. And then we're going to figure out, how do we work with them? Do we waive late fees? Do we work on concessions? Do we figure out something to keep them there? Because it's a trying time for everybody. And how do we reflect that so we're not kind of seen coming out of this as being unempathetic towards what's going on?
So a collection event in this chart is any time that you've tried to communicate with a customer that they have a payment that's due. It's not necessarily that they paid. It's just a reminder or a call, a mix of automation and manual that rent is due.
Any point of contact, yeah. Text, emails, phone calls, and whatnot.
And every time there's an event, if a tenant interacts with that event, at that point in time, would that be when they would enroll in autopay?
Yeah, so they might get a call and press 9 to connect into our pay-by-phone system. They might get a email and click a link to open up our payment portal. And it's at that point they're able to process the payment. That's where those payments are happening on the previous slide. That's where that autopay enrollment, they're able to choose to enroll in autopay is taking place. And then even if it's something where they're not able to pay, they can talk to that manager and ask, hey, I'm going to be in on Friday, and they can delay those messages till then. So we call it a promise to pay. And so we're not continuing to badger them when we've already had a conversation with them.
Got it.
But yeah, so I mean, that's really kind of the core of the data we went through. Obviously it shows a lot of improvement through the months. It's showing kind of that continuous from April being our floor to May to June. And we're really expecting to see that continue to trend up in July and further months, such that hopefully we can put all this behind us and know, as an industry, storage has again, been resilient in the midst of it, and hopefully, strong business for all of us to kind of continue to go on.
Agreed. Was there anything that surprised you out of the numbers?
To tell you the truth, I was surprised to see June, how well it's returned. June has become almost pre-COVID numbers, across the board, payments and leads and rentals and all those things that are business critical for us. We're starting to see more return to normalcy than I would have expected this early, but I'm glad to see it.
Me too. Well, thank you, Phil. Is there anything else you think we should discuss?
No, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of data here. We're going to continue to have, these talks come out. Holly, I know we're working on a webinar series that we're going to have, kind of a recurring different topic. We're going to kind of leave behind a lot of the COVID conversation as we're heading into the kind of the new world, and and really looking forward to getting started on a lot of that too.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.